really obscure pottery.
I know.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
And so we only ever looked at one.
Do I have to press the third button along, which has got a TV screen?
No, so that's if you want to share your screen.
Oh, okay, I don't.
Again, like your person, they didn't know.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hi, Bob. Very well, are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the conference. I think the quality of these sessions is really good.
That's really good. I just joined just about 20 minutes early just to have a look, and it seemed good.
We had a very good debate this morning, I think, on the environmental panel.
Yeah, I have more to say to Tristan, but I'll save that for another day. I have to say the suggestion about it's just us that can be heard, right? We're not in the rest of the room right now.
You are in the rest of the room.
Okay.
So everyone can hear you.
So there is more to talk about on another day.
Well, Bud, I think you should. I think it's much more interesting, these side conversations that everyone can hear.
Well, actually, the main thing I would say I said in the morning session, which is the idea that the EU imposing a tax on international trade to fund their own operations and their own technology development. I'd like to be in the room if that were actually suggested to be an application of common but differentiated responsibilities. I think that the developing countries would view that a bit differently. So.
Good morning.
Hi, Patrik. How are you?
Good afternoon, I should say.
They all blend together.
What time is it for you, Patrik? And you're in Miami, aren't you?
Yeah, it's 9:30.
9:30.
So, looking forward to this session. I think it'll be good. So I think we're just waiting for Pete to join us.
Hello.
Hi, Pete.
Hi. Gosh, I got in. I was a bit worried there for a second. It was not behaving properly this afternoon. You know how these things are. It seems fine on the test run. You go to do it yourself on your own, and nothing works properly.
I think many of our participants could also have the same experience.
Yeah.
So.
It worked.
Of course, we're all having to adapt to different platforms all the time too. It's not as if everything looks and feels the same. So.
Yeah, I've just about got used to doing using Teams and Zoom at home and Teams at work. And every so often, someone throws in something different to us. I think, why do I have to download the software to start with this?
Yes, I've had that experience myself.
Yeah.
So my understanding is we've got our participants are in the conversation now, and they're gathering, and we're just waiting for Michael to give us a go-ahead to kick off.
Okay, good.
Yeah, everyone is here, and yeah, Bud, you can start if you'd like now. We can just have people coming in.
And just for everyone's benefit, Michael, could you repeat what the stop time is?
Absolutely.
On this session?
So we have an hour on this session, so we will have a short break at 3:35 UK time.
Great. So with that, it's my pleasure to have had the opportunity to moderate this session today about the cruise sector. I was just saying as we joined, and some of you may have heard my comments, I think that it's really been an excellent conference so far. And although none of us wish that it had to be a virtual conference all the time, I think that the that the chamber has really made a lot of it, and I'm really impressed at the lineup of speakers and the diversity of ideas that we've had. And I've liked that we don't all have exactly the same opinions on things, so I found it to be enjoyable, and I hope you have too. So focusing on the cruise sector, I'm really very pleased to have three esteemed panelists to introduce to you. I'm Bud Darr, the Executive Vice President of Maritime Policy and Government Affairs at the MSC Group. I work across our divisions in both cargo, which is by far the larger part of our business, but also MSC Cruises, which is currently has 18 modern cruise ships on the water, and is, I believe, slightly ahead of what was the number 3 cruise line as far as volume goes. But at the moment, that's kind of a theoretical concept, I think, as most of our panelists could confirm. But we will talk about COVID a little bit as we go on through the panel. But I really think it's important that we won't ignore the elephant standing in the middle of the room, but we really want to talk about some of the more positive things that are happening too, and the outlook for the industry on the backside of it. But if you could hold what I'm sure are some questions about the COVID pandemic and how the cruise sector has managed that situation, what we see about it, we will get to that a little bit later in the session. So if I could introduce just briefly our 3 expert panelists, then we'll move into some questions, and we'll talk about some other things that we think are very exciting. So we have Peter Darr, who's the Managing Director of Fred Olsen Cruise Lines.
Hi, hello.
And we are also joined by Nick Stace, who's the CEO of Saga Travel, which includes Saga Cruises, and Patrik Dahlgren, who is the Senior Vice President at the Royal Caribbean Group for Global Marine Operations and Fleet Optimization. These 3 gentlemen I've had the opportunity to work with in varying capacities, some longer than others. I think, Patrik, when I first met you, you were still captain of, at that time, I think was the largest cruise ship in the world. We were both a little younger then, but Peter and Nick and I have worked very closely together and worked together with the UK Chamber as well. So I think we've had similar experiences we've shared together over the past year. We've had some experiences that go far beyond that, and I hope that many more that we'll have together. So where I thought maybe we'd start this discussion today is talking about how green technology and our aspirations to decarbonize our part of the shipping sector maybe can play into what we see currently in new ships coming into the fleet, and maybe what's coming in the future, and the types of things that we're really focused on in features in these new ships. And Nick, maybe I'll start with you. I mean, you've got 2 very new ships that have joined your fleet from a European shipbuilder, and I know they've got great features. And I was wondering if maybe I could turn to you first and ask for your thoughts about how you've incorporated these technologies, and what sort of things you think are exciting about your new ships, and what you maybe see coming in the future.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Bud. And also to echo, just before I do speak about that subject, the view that I probably get to see you and Pete more than I get to see my family at the moment. So you've become very much a part of my family over this last year, given the amount of time we spent together. And it's also refreshing to actually speak about something that isn't directly COVID related. For once, I seem to spend my life talking about COVID, as I know we all probably do. Look, I think the future is really positive in terms of the tremendous commitment that the shipping sector and the cruise sector in particular has made towards making significant improvements to the environment, to our impact on the environment. And we are, I think, taking that challenge very seriously as a sector. And actually, in part, I think we're taking it seriously because we know our customers expect and want us to do that. And if I take my customer group in particular, older people, funnily enough, don't go on the marches necessarily. They don't speak about it perhaps as much as the younger generation, but they actually want to see it, and they actually take action themselves in ways that perhaps other generations don't. So they feel it very much that it's right for us to be taking the action we are. Look, you mentioned our new fleet. I mean, that does give us a tremendous advantage over where we were just 18 months ago. 18 months ago, we had 2 ships that were 35 years old each. old technologies, and we're polluting in ways that the new ships just aren't. And just by taking on the new ships, we've reduced our emissions by a third overnight, and that's without other actions that we're also taking. It's probably worth just saying one thing. We don't see it, and I'm sure that's true of the other operators as well. We don't just see it through the lens of the ships themselves, although that's critical, and it's right that we get the right technologies in place, and those will continue to improve, and we will continue to adapt the ships as we can as those improvements come along. But it's also important to think about it as part of the whole company. I mean, Pete perhaps can speak about that in particular, because the other part of what Fred Olsen does is really tremendous in terms of the contribution they make to the environment. But I'll leave Pete to say that. But for us, the other part of our business is around insurance. So we have two parts of the business, travel and insurance. And there is a much wider ESG agenda, this environment, social and governance agenda, which takes us into areas of, for example, the Mark Carney, Mike Bloomberg initiative around, recording the emissions that we have across our financial services business, the TCFD as it's known. We're also the buildings that we have, the 18 buildings that we have across the United Kingdom. We need to make sure that they are working and functioning in the most environmental way possible. Single-use plastics, the charitable causes that we support, the coastal communities we seek to support as well. So for us, it's a really wide brief when we come to think about the environment.
Thank you, Nick. And those of you who listened to the environmental session earlier know that there's some diversity of views out there and how to approach this. And I think that diversity of views is very healthy. But as you may have heard in some of the exchanges there, including what I participated in, the commonality is we really know we have to stand shoulder to shoulder and get there. And we have to, among other environmental and sustainability goals, we have to decarbonize cruise shipping as well as the entire shipping sector. And we have to work together on it. Pete, I would like to go ahead and just follow on from Nick to you. You've also had some recent acquisitions that have changed the composition of your fleet a bit too. How about telling us a little bit about how that fits in with your sustainability goals, particularly maybe as it relates to decarbonization as well, and what you see coming for the future, and tell us a bit about your ships.
Thank you, Bud. Probably a good place to start is that we're really pleased to see 2 new ships come to our fleet during the latter part of last year, and we're really happy to hopefully get them up and running fairly soon, but I'm sure we'll come on to that at some point in the discussion today. I think really our thoughts on this is really where we started many years ago in our whole overall attitude towards decarbonisation and our footprint. This goes quite a long way back in Fred Olsen, far further than just Fred Olsen Cruise Lines. Our group by Cruise Lines is part of also has a company called Fred Olsen Renewables. And we really share the same platform, and Fred Olsen Renewables in one form or another have been around for probably 20 years. It may not be Renewables M, but they've been around. So it's been really part of our initiative to see what we can do in terms of a footprint across the group, our carbon footprint. And what we do have, if we do share a technical services group within an in-house technical services group. So really from the starting point of renewables and cruise, we share some technology, some thought process amongst all of those engineers who are working either on wind technology or through a cruise ship, who share a common platform of working together to make sure whatever we're doing, we can look at it from a cruise perspective to see what we can do and how we can improve our efficiencies from there. It goes even further than that. We've recently built a new office in Ipswich and went through a whole process to make sure that was can efficiently operate going forward, right through to even the getting people to and from work. And we won an award locally for actually all of the initiative we put forward to getting people to and from work in the office. Not working today because we're all sitting at home, but it's something which we're really pleased it's something we've worked through. So from my point of view, it all starts with getting the attitude right and then working from there some of the initiatives we've done over the years is all about, as you know, most of our ships, they're not new ships. Some of them are sort of 15, 20 years old plus. We've always looked at each year, how do we invest in these? How do we make them more efficient? And if you knew some of our previous ships, one of the things we did is re-engine both ships. And it was something at the time which was quite new to do on cruise ships from there. But it made a huge difference to performance of that ship and to our carbon footprint from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And I think Nick and in the diversity of their company at Saga, which has many other businesses even connected to travel, and Fred Olsen as well. Although I think Fred Olsen has actually a lot of very diverse enterprises that go well beyond things we would talk about here today as well. A lot of people don't know that about the company. We're a diverse company, but we're really diverse among shipping interests and don't venture too much out of that. Patrik, I think your company's a bit different. I mean, you're diverse, but you're diverse among a range of cruise products principally. So your perspective may be a bit different. And I'd like to turn to you. And I was wondering if you could also address our relationship with CLIA as well, because in addition to the work that we've done very closely and constructively with the UK Chamber, CLIA is also a bit of a unifying force around us for many policy issues.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bud, and thank you both, Peter and Nick. I think you have done very well of all the great things that's being done and being planned for the future. I think overall, first of all, as a company representing Royal Caribbean Group, we have a diverse in terms of portfolio of amount of cruises. So we have the Royal Caribbean International brand, which is more larger ships in general, lots of new, really bold design, whether it is with active sports on board, with zip liner, with aqua theater, with ice skating rinks, lots of new, really cool tech in terms of entertainment and so forth on board the vessel to really create unique experiences. But then we have the Celebrity Cruises brand, more of a modern luxury brand with design and dining and really innovative way of dining and experiences for the guest. And then the Silver Sea brand, who obviously with smaller ships being able to go to more diverse locations and so forth around the world, with also great, dining experiences on board and so forth. And then we have joint ventures with TUI Cruises, German operator, and a recent acquisition with Hapag-Lloyd Cruises as well, which all very successful brands in itself. And again, with very diverse markets and so forth. But to take up on your point there, in terms of decarbonization and overall sustainability, it's a very broad word, sustainability, obviously, since it goes across lots of different facets. But to your point, Bud, it's a key strategic imperative for us overall with sustainability, and also looking at partners. And really what you mentioned about CLIA, for example, the partnership that we have as an industry, we don't compete in health, safety, and environment. We are working together as a group, and that's not a competition. We share what we do. We work together through CLIA, or in this forum, for example, with UK Chamber of Shipping and different organizations. And CLIA have really, on the CLIA platform, have provided really successful imperative for us, working together with standards, creating global policies, and coming up with all of these different learnings that we have had from the different brands. So for us, really, it is the collaboration with the shipyards, working together with different green technology companies. And I think, as Peter mentioned, the broadness between when a new ship comes up, which in general for us is 20% or more energy efficient from ship to ship coming out new, which of course create an incredible difference. And even though the standards is set up in terms of waste management and so forth is the same, it's very much a focus on existing ships, whether it is upgrade to new technologies on existing vessels. Also, with the background from myself being on board a ship as a captain, we really are focusing a lot on the support for the technical, nautical, and hotel operation on board in order to continuously improve and decrease the footprint from existing ships, whether again that is through green technologies or data or digital technologies that we monitor from our head base in supporting the ship and providing the operators on board with means of digital technology to be able to continuously improve safety and decrease the footprint of the vessel. So it really is about partnership, again, working with green technology companies and continue to drive down the impact the industry have, and to the destinations that we go, which is obviously a key portion of what we do in developing new destinations in both economic growth for those locations and also in terms of whether it's waste management or overall impact to the environment that can be continuously improved and help those societies improve as we come in. So we make a global good impact as an industry.
Thank you, Patrik. And I think I'm going to come back to you first for a follow-up question here. And recognizing that you have the diversity of your Galapagos ship, I think has less than 20 passengers on board, but yet you've got the if I recall correctly, the 4 or 5 largest cruise ships in the world, all in your fleet as well. You've got a wide range there, and as we talk about how we might move towards decarbonizing, and with in mind both the 2030 and 2050 IMO levels of ambitions, what sort of technologies have you deployed? Have you chosen one particular track or multiple tracks? And specifically, what do you see as options for the existing fleet, of which you have many in the scope of your particular enterprise?
It will be great to answer that there's one technology with one solution to everything, and then we will be all finished. But it really is a layered approach to all of it, and it's a long list of technologies, both that you could implement on new ship and that we are implementing on new ships. But for the existing ships, and as you call the diversity that we have, obviously we have the Galapagos operation with the smallest catamaran with 16 guests, and some really great 2 new ships, both from the Celebrity brand with Celebrity Flora and Galapagos with 100 guests, and then the silver ship as well in Galapagos with as well 100 passengers, and then the Oasis class with the latest, the Symphony of the Seas, which, as you said, Bud, that's where we met first time when I was captain on Oasis, and that ship is taking well over 6,000 guests in max capacity. So it is obviously a diverse implementation of technology, a long list of different type of technology, whether it is focused directly on emission control for NOx or SOx or overall carbon, or energy decreasing, obviously they're quite energy intense, obviously being very large vessels. So to really deploy technology in order to get that impact down significantly and to the operator. So it's a long laundry list of items that we obviously implementing and have implemented over time. We have quite really ambitious and bold targets to every single year take down that energy consumption year over year to both the operators on board and for us who are responsible for getting it down. So it's a bold track.
Patrik, and I should mention too that as many of us that are speakers today are members of the supervisory board of the UK Chamber, and we really welcome Royal Caribbean's decision to reestablish their formal relationship with the Chamber. So on behalf of the president and the rest of the supervisory board, we really welcome you back, and thank you for that commitment. Pete, I'd like to maybe turn to you next as you look at the ships that you've got now in your fleet. What sort of thinking do you have about adapting them for future fuels? Are you looking at that now, and have you found partners that can help you evaluate that? Because it's obviously a much easier proposition when you're thinking about a forward-looking design that the steel hasn't been cut for yet, or maybe not even close to being cut, than it is for retrofitting. Because I know we face some of the same challenges in our fleet as well. What sort of thinking do you have around that? I'm sorry, Pete, I think you may be muted. Pete, we can't hear you. Nick, if I could ask you the same question while maybe we sort out the technical question technical issue with Pete. Nick, can I point the same question at you? Although your ships are now quite new, there's certainly going to be challenges to be met there as we move on to these future fuels. What sort of thinking do you have around that? What sort of partners have you found?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question because we can never, can we, as a sector, as an operator, sort of rest on our laurels and think that we've done the job when it comes to climate change and the impact that we have on the environment. So it's a very good question. It's a challenging one for us because we've now got, as you just said, 2 new ships. That is our fleet. We're a small operator. We also have river boat cruises as well. And in fact, this morning, or back yesterday, but it was in the papers this morning, we announced our 2nd new river cruiser as well. So we've deliberately taken a decision sometime way before I became chief executive that we would invest in new hardware. And the main emphasis when we did this was of course the quality that we wanted to provide our guests, but also putting the environment center stage in terms of, you know, making sure that we were the hardware that we had in place would last, you know, the period of time and would also support further changes and adaptations. So we are constantly looking at that, even with a new fleet. And I should say, one of our 2 ships hasn't even left Tilbury yet. Perhaps that'll be another subject that we come to in a moment. once
we can get to that.
Once we're able to leave, we will really start to see what more we can do. But look, we work with partners on this, of course we do, and we will constantly challenge ourselves. It's a major commitment of Saga to remain at the forefront of these technologies and these changes, and we'll make sure that our ships, as far as possible, are able to adapt to those changes.
So Nick, before I turn back to Pete, I'd like to use a comment you made as maybe a stepping stone to introduce another topic, and that is large ships versus small ships. And if you're venturing into river cruises as well with new builds, could you comment a little bit about what you see there? I mean, is there room for both types of ships in the size spectrum in the marketplace in your particular demographic?
I think there totally is. And I think it all comes down to how well do you know your customers? And of course, the better you get to know your customers, the more you realize that actually your customers don't all want the same thing. And particularly when you think of a demographic, not all people over 50 want a Saga cruise. Some will be very happy to be part of a family cruise, will like the scale of a larger operator because of the extra facilities that might be there. Look, we very much specialize in small luxury boutique cruising. And as you may or may not know, we're exclusively for the over 50s. So in fact, we don't welcome families, at least not young families, on board our ships. So I think there's plenty of room for all of us. This is not a sector that needs a one size fits all. And it is all about tailoring what we do to our customers, what they want most of all. And I think there is one challenge, I think, to larger ships just in the short term. But I think we'll get through this reasonably quickly. And it does move on to the COVID question. And that is that there will be probably some destinations for a period of time that might want to cap tourism numbers. So there may well be a challenge to some of the larger ships for a short period of time. I happen to think it won't be for very long, but there is a sort of short-term potential hit there. And we, like all the other operators, are currently, speaking to ports around the world. Obviously, we're not even open as a country yet. We've become almost like a fortress Britain ourselves. So we're not even in that place at the moment. But once we are, and once those things start to relax, it may be a little bit slower for the larger ships to be able to take full advantage of all the ports that are available. Smaller ships may have a small advantage to begin with on that. But again, we don't really know at this moment in time.
Thank you, Nick. Pete, hopefully we've got your audio back. And if so, I'd like to repose that question to you about, how do you adapt, or what's your thinking on adapting your existing ships as we move forward to these new fuels as they come, and what sort of partners have you found to work with? And then if you could also comment a little bit about size of cruise ships.
Sure. Hopefully you can hear me now, Bud. Can you? Yeah, it works. Turn it on and off again, and it always works. Yeah, I mean, we've operating with these ships and having our own in-house technical department. It's something which we've worked on for many years, both in the past and going into the future. As I mentioned earlier, two of the ships in the past we re-engined, and at the time everyone said that, will you ever get your money back on that type of investment to strip those ships out of the engines and put new ones in and the efficiencies and whatever. And for sure, we got our money back many, many times over, together with reducing the carbon emissions significantly by operating with those new engines in those ships. So the same continues to apply with our philosophy within our business, that we really believe that we can take our current fleet and over a period of time invest them in such a way that it will reduce emissions, being one, and make the ships more efficient at the second time. And someone mentioned earlier amongst you that your newer ships and with new engines in are 20% more efficient. They're the kind of things we've seen if we start to invest in technology. So our attitude to doing it is twofold. It's great for the environment. At the same time, it's actually fantastic in terms of a payback for a business. You've just got to work with the right people, the right engineering support there, to ensure that the projects you invest on actually come out the other end with what you're looking for. And we're really in a fortunate position to have this super in-house department who've got these renewable skills from the other part of the sector we have within our business, who we work really closely alongside. So we pick certain developments to say, this is going to work. We can see it works on all the different fronts we're trying to achieve. And we go ahead with it from there. And we see that on a couple of the vessels at the moment. We're looking at some technology which we think will be good going forward in certain destinations in the world where we believe they could become more restrictive in the next few years. And we just need to keep up with that, really. And it's something we're working on at the moment, Bud.
Thank you, Pete. Patrik, I want to turn to you next. I think you've probably in large part answered the question in that you've got 16 passengers on your Galapagos ship and over 6,000 on your largest ships. But I was wondering if you would be able to comment a bit on what sort of unique sustainability challenges you face with the larger ships in particular. Obviously, our company, where we do have some very large ships, we're facing some of the same challenges, and I know we compare thoughts on that quite often because, as you said, it's not an area that we compete on at all. And then I was wondering if you could maybe answer a further question that has come in from the audience here, but I think it's a good one. To what degree are customers actually driving your efforts towards sustainability? Are they really driven by the customer base in your experience, or are they driven by more the corporate goals that you've set within your company?
I think it's actually a very good question. I see them coming in too here, and thank you, Catherine, and so forth, who asked the question. No, on the larger ship, what we see obviously with the improvement that we can do, the larger ship being the newest one as well and have the lowest type of impact and consumption, but it also gives those ships, since they are newer, have a larger flexibility in terms of potential upgrades, since the technology is so new already, and giving that space ratio that we have on board, you have a unique opportunity in terms of upgrades and improvements that you could do to those vessels further. So of course, even though the focus is quite strong on existing vessels and trying to upgrade with new technologies to the older vessels, the new vessels do have opportunities in terms of re-engineering, and because of the space ratio, they are quite unique in terms of how we can do that. So when we have retrofitted some of the newer ships with various emission technologies, those really do provide a unique opportunity compared to the older, more compact vessels, the way they were designed. So I would say the larger vessel do have a lot of opportunities. Having said that, we also are upgrading down to the smallest ones as well with different technologies as we look through the portfolio of ideas. But there is not one size fits all in this technology field. So whether it is different future fuels that one is looking at and so forth, I think the opportunity again is across the board of all the vessels. But to your second question, Bud, and what came in is, I think, who's driving this? I think it's again a combination. overall, whether it is, a generational, and whether some deciding to go to the streets and protest, or whether they're deciding to do it in silence. I think it's a general consensus in the world overall that the drive for sustainability and environment, and I think everybody is on that track nowadays, and it's very few places who are not focused on the area, whether it is the port in itself, whether it is the local communities, and also the guests. We have a lot of guest questions, and for example, when we launch new ships in the past, going back just some years, even though we did our announcement of the technologies we implemented to improve efficiencies and so forth, it wasn't taken to the media in such an extent that maybe we wanted, considering the investment we did in it. But now, as we launch, for example, the latest celebrity vessel, Celebrity Edge, it was a very large focus, both from a media perspective and also from overall customer perspective. And they were really asking for, what are we doing? What are we doing on board, for example, with single-use plastic? Straws are gone. We have recyclable bottles, aluminium ones, versus the plastic bottles that we used to have in the past. So there's many aspects of things that, the customers are really keen on and are interested in, and so forth. So I think it's a shift. It's a shift overall, and it's across all generations. So it's not just the Greta Thunberg of the world that is focusing on this. It's obviously a very broad spectrum, and rightly so.
Patrik, just make a comment from our perspective at MSC on the cargo side of our business. Ironically, for some time, and maybe on an increasing basis almost every day, we're getting more and more demand from our customers on sustainability. But they all have, particularly the larger customers, their own sustainability plans and KPIs they're trying to meet. So it's kind of logical that they're a little bit more organized in it. Whereas from our guests, it's not quite the same in the cruise side of the business, although we're seeing the kind of trend you are, but that you are at your company. But I'm going to make a statement about there and ask Nick and Pete to comment if their observation is the same, that the way I respond to that is it will come. Things are changing. And particularly as we think about a new cruise ship, as Nick has and Patrik has many, and Pete's got some newer ships in his fleet too, we're building ships that are maybe 30, maybe 40-year assets. I think in 2019, if I recall correctly, the average recycling age of a cruise ship was 43.8 years. By the time we get the customers of tomorrow that we need on those ships to have a sustainable business model, the ethos of that generation and the sensitivity of this is different. And if we don't adapt, we may not have businesses that actually meet the demands of the customers. So I was wondering, Nick, maybe if I could ask you to comment on that first. Do you see that kind of a trend continuing? And do you agree with the statement that I made?
They do. So I mean, that's the short answer. I'll give you a slightly longer answer, which is
you can do both.
Which is I could do both. Which is, I started, I suppose, answering the previous question by saying that our customers, who, I mean, the average age of our customer is 72 years old. We survey our customers constantly, and you'll know that over things like the decision that we took over the vaccine and so on. So we're constantly surveying our customers, and the environment and the environmental impact of what they do matters greatly to them. And in fact, they change their behaviour according to decisions which they think are going to have a positive or negative impact on the environment. So if we didn't take it seriously, our customers would vote with their wallets and go elsewhere to operators that did take it seriously. So is that critical? I mean, to the point that Pete was making earlier, it actually makes good business sense to do the right thing by the environment. It's that classic William Lever phrase, I think it's called, enlightened self-interest. If you do it for the right reasons, funnily enough, it will also follow through to your bottom line as well. So there's no question in our minds that our current customers think that the environment is incredibly important. They want to hand on to the next generation, not a complete and utter mess. They want to be able to hand on to say that they've done the right thing as far as they possibly can. Now, that's the current generation that I think perception might think hasn't cared about the environment, about the generations that follow them. I happen to disagree with that particular point, and I can only say that because through that door there, it lives my 17-year-old who lives who sort of lives constantly on screens, and the lights are always on. And while he might go on protests and all the rest, I can tell you, he doesn't care about the environment as much as my dad does, or at least he doesn't follow through on his actions. But over time, he will, and the generation above, and so on. They will begin to care more and more and more. So if we don't get the ingredients right now, and we don't make it a kind of a critical part of our DNA as a sector, we will be over with. So it's very, very important. I just don't think this is not a sideshow. I'm delighted, actually, it was kind of the first question, really, because it's not a sideshow. It's a central question for all of us to answer very seriously.
Thank you, Nick. Pete, I'll let you have the last word on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, I can really echo what Nick's saying. I mean, we do a number of surveys with our guests as well. And, these surveys we track over a period of years. If I go back to surveys we were doing sort of 7 or 8 years ago and people's perspective on sustainability, and look back at the last survey, which we did probably 6 to 12 months ago, and looked at those style of questions, the importance has grown exponentially between what people are expecting us to be trying to achieve compared to what they thought a number of years ago. And they really see it's important that we are actually at the forefront of doing what we can to be making things right. And that's both behind the scenes in terms of technology and engineering and emissions, and in front of what they see, right down to the plastic bottle once there 2 or 3 years ago, and they'd be disgusted to think if they went on board a cruise ship now, on our ships now, and saw plastic bottles being used. So all of that had to be changed, together with what happens behind the scenes in terms of single-use plastics, where we use them for cleaning, things like that. All of that's had to be changed in the last sort of 12 to 18 months. So lots of upheaval going on, which people don't see, but it's there, and that's what our customers expect us to be doing. We don't necessarily, how can I put it, market to them to tell them we're doing these things, but I think they physically see it when they go on board, and they can actually sense it with the way, the behavior of what people are doing on board, our crew are doing, and how they're organizing things. It'd be quite obvious that we're much more caring and dealing with things in a much more sensitive way than we were a few years ago. So that becomes more just a change culture for all of us over year on year, as we invest in that.
Well, thanks, Pete. I'd like to go ahead and shift gears now a little bit, and we'll go take a look at the pachyderm that's standing in the middle of our living room. And let's talk a bit about COVID and the impact that it's had in the short term, but maybe more importantly, what we've done together, and maybe what you've done as individual cruise lines to help find a pathway beyond this when the conditions are right for us to be operating on a larger scale. As I think you all know, our company's been operating in the Mediterranean almost continuously, except for the over the Christmas holidays, since August or so, on a limited scale, but we've been gaining experience ourselves, and we found that very useful. Nick, maybe if you could comment on the work that you've been involved in and what you see as the pathway forward. I know you've been pretty public about some of the extraordinary steps that you've taken in anticipation of restarting.
Yeah. So it does feel like, if you're ever to be invited onto Mastermind, that this is your specialist chosen subject, really, isn't it? Because I think for all of us, we've become far more expert on COVID than we ever thought we would ever be around a pandemic. But so I think I should start by saying, as Michael is on this call as well, how phenomenal Michael and the Chamber have been around this, because I have to say the critical success milestone of the last 12 months was when the UK Chamber published guidance that got endorsement across government and actually set out the pathway to resumption. And that was a phenomenal piece of work. You cannot ever underestimate the amount of work that goes into something like that. And Michael and the team, Bob and others, did an extraordinary job to get it into the right place and to get that kind of level of support. So it's been an absolute delight working with the UK Chamber, and I might say with the other operators too, because we are all different, but what we managed to do was to unite behind a set of standards that we can apply in all settings, whether it be 16 people on board our smallest vessels or 6,000 or 7,000. So and that's a hell of an achievement to be able to sort of pull that off. So really fantastic. But we are all different, and we all go at slightly different paces. And look, I can only speak for my company, but we have been desperately keen to sort of lead the way as far as we possibly can in terms of the speed in which we've adopted these standards. So we were the first, I think you know, to get the Lloyd's Register Shield Plus award for both of our ships. So that is basically taking the protocols that were agreed in the guidance and applying them to each of the ships, and then getting accreditation as such. And that's a critical milestone for us, because it means that when the time is right, we are ready to go. The second thing we've done, which I think has got a fair bit of publicity about it, because of perhaps we were one of the first to do it, but is that we decided, based on our customer feedback, that we would insist that all customers would have to have the vaccine, both vaccines, both injections at least, prior to traveling with us. Now, that was a big departure from the rest of the sector. And by the way, I pass no judgment whatsoever on the rest of the sector for not following suit at the moment. I really don't. This is about our customers. It's particular to our customers and what they thought was important. And 98% of them said that they would want to have the vaccinations before traveling with us. And 93% of them said they would actually only really want to travel with us if others had also had the vaccination as well. So for us, it became a kind of a non-issue. It wasn't that we were likely to pick a fight with 98% of our customers. I've never liked those particular fights. Of what it did do is is every anti-vaxxer in the world has turned particularly onto my Twitter account, but onto others as well. We have attracted, not actually mainly from this country, mainly from America, I have to say, who have found our decision to be not to their liking. So there's a great deal of work that's been undertaken. I'll just say, just as a final point, because I'm very happy to come back on any of that, and I know this will others want to come in as well, though, is that the critical thing is, and it's great, Bud, that you're already out there in the Med doing what you can to get started, because the critical thing will be that we do this successfully and that we don't have global negative headlines, because we know the challenge for going into the pandemic was that the Diamond Princess cast a terrible shadow over the whole sector, and we still live with that. And so when we all do return to service, in whichever form we do, we have a responsibility not just to our customers, of course, that's first and foremost, to our companies, of course we do, but I think we have a wider responsibility to our sector to do it responsibly, so that, you know, where we go out first, second or third, others can follow.
Nick, and I'm actually quite grateful that you took the time to express yourself fully there. This is an extremely important topic, and we certainly didn't mean to avoid it. We just didn't want to put it first. We wanted to talk about some other things first. And I do want to echo your compliments for the work of the Chamber, and Michael specifically, and Bob Sanguinetti as well. I also want to mention that this is an area where one of the very last things I did when I left CLIA and joined MSC was to execute a memorandum of understanding between CLIA and the UK Chamber. And I think, although at the time David Dingle and I were working very closely on bringing that together with the existing Secretary General of the UK Chamber, we didn't know exactly what the circumstances would be. But I can tell you, when this situation came up, it fit perfectly the kind of model that we had in mind, where we could leverage the best expertise of both organizations and bring the mutual membership together in those collaborative efforts. And I, for a case of first impression, I could not have asked for more out of the UK Chamber and their work here. Pete, I'd like to turn to you and maybe just ask the same sort of a question of you. You know, what do you see as the pathways you're following to emerge from this when the time is right for you and your company? And also, if you could comment a bit about the collaboration between the industry and the association work we've done.
Yeah, sure. Let's start with your latter part first. I think that through the Chamber Shipping and CLIA and the UK Cruise Lines, it's been an amazing collaboration. You know, it's been a real, how can you describe it, community spirit of trying to work together to really try to find some common ways of building some guidance which we think will work overall for the industry, and then it's about how we operate to some standards from there, within what the guidance given by the UK government as well. I think it's quite an amazing thing that all these cruise lines in the UK have got together, all different size ships, all differently owned in terms of their perspective, all different sets of characters, quite strong views at time. But actually, we've all got together and worked incredibly well together, right at a senior level, right through to the operations department and right through to the medical departments. Have all had their own working groups connected to each other, and really with a common goal of making sure whatever we build here, we're building things which are right for cruising for the future, to make it sure it's 100% safe for our passengers and of course our crew. It's been a really amazing effort over the last year to get to that point, and albeit we're not back, as we call it here, back in the water yet, I do believe the standards which we've set ourselves are in a really good place to put us back sailing when the time is right. We're all clear that time is not quite right today. From there, we think that using this set of standards within our organization, it will be part of what I describe as a multi-layered approach. So we'll have these standards, and upon that we'll have our own standards which will be cemented next to them, which really will make it sure that when our guests come on board, and of course our crew, they feel really comfortable with the way we're operating as a business, and we're dealing with both at the front of house step there, where everything they see, touch and feel, for example, right through to what's happening behind the scenes. It's operating really efficiently from that perspective. And when there are issues, because there'll always be issues when ships are at sea, we have really strong protocols, procedures and ways to leverage that risk for everyone on board the ship. So I mean, I'm pretty confident when we get sailing again, we'll be in a really, really good place. And what I do see, though, that we're not there yet, and science and things will happen over the next few months, which will change some of the ways we think about what we do, and what I knew 6 months ago about how we might be operating compared to where we are. We've changed some of our thought processes. I'm sure that'll happen by the time we get back sailing again. We'll say we don't need this bit anymore, but we need to put this bit in place as well. So, we've not been too prescriptive to our guests, our people who booked with us, saying we're going to do A, B, and C, because they think the model will change between now and then. But I think overall we do feel it's going hugely in the right direction. It may not feel it sitting, in my office here in my home, but I can really see what we've done as an industry in the UK. This common approach to what we're doing and this community approach will hold us in a good position when we go back sailing again.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. Patrik, I want to turn to you next, but I want to add in a couple of other elements here that I'd like for you to address. So, you and I are in frequent contact because we're in similar stages of restarting operation, although your focus is on Singapore right now with a somewhat different style of cruise. And I was wondering if you could comment on that. Also, I was wondering if you could comment on what you're doing with regard to crew when you deploy them to the ship to staff up, because you've had that experience as we have, and I think we've had very similar experiences, but I'd rather it come from you. And then the last thing I was hoping you could address as well, in addition to any general comments you want to make, is in light of your ongoing new building program, which is quite aggressive and diverse in the ship types you're building, do you see significant changes in design coming post-pandemic compared to what we saw pre-pandemic?
Thank you, Bud. And I just want to echo what you all have said before, through the UK Chamber of Shipping and the collaboration that has taken place here and the work in UK in terms of resumption and plans and so forth. I think it's great for us as a group to join again here, and it's really been, we have quite a large footprint in the UK, with the big part of my group actually sitting in Weybridge outside of London. So it really is. It's great to see the progress and how everybody have worked together. But to your point, first of all, on Singapore, Bud, we are operating. It's rather unique compared to your MSC Grandiosa in Italy, in terms of that it's a cruise to the ocean. So it's this cruise from Singapore and back, and there is no destinations, right? So it's a unique closed environment. And for us, it's provided a really good platform to execute the protocols. And as as we have worked together, particularly with MSC and also across CLIA, in developing protocols and plan, we as Royal Caribbean Group put together in an alliance with the ex-Secretary of Health in the US and the ex-Commissioner of FDA in US, a group of experts. So put together the best minds. So their task was to put together the best minds in leaders in public health, biosecurity, epidemiology, and so forth. So I have learned more about that than I ever wanted, but it's been a very interesting group over many, many months working together and looking at the environment on a cruise ship and how to create a safe environment and a bubble on a cruise ship. And those 74 recommendations that panel of experts put together became also CLIA as a baseline for the policy, for the global CLIA policy, since this group and us shared all that with CLIA and worked together with all the lines. And then us as individual lines, of course, putting our individual implementation of various aspects of policies and procedures together for the unique environment, where Singapore really was a unique case, or is a unique case, in the sense that they have also quite low prevalence, but the way it's being organized there together with the local health authority and so forth have really shown that, the collaboration is key, as we're doing here with the UK Chamber and the UK government. I think it's key to work together and have a plan, in whether it is in terms of testing, screening, the reduction of exposure on board, ventilation. We did a chunk of work on actually together with experts, and also being able to respond should there be a case on board, and how we do that in collaboration with the destination, right? So I think from that aspect, but I think it's been an interesting journey, and I think we do provide a very unique environment on board a cruise ship. It is controllable compared to general society. We have that unique ability. We also have a very high level of compliance, and we see that in Singapore with the ship we're operating, as well as our TUI brand, who operates in the Canary Islands currently on multiple cruises, and did so earlier in the year also in Greece. It's really interesting to see, and we all knew this because we have a general high level of compliance on safety and everything else compared to general society. And we can see that on board the ships as well, as you can see, Bud, with your MSC vessel in Italy, the level of compliance and the uniqueness of the cruise ships, that we really are able to control it in a much better way than you can in general society.
I threw a lot at you to unpack at once, but I was wondering if you could touch on just a little bit more detail. Do you think the forward-looking designs are going to be substantially different than the previous designs as a result of the pandemic, or do you see it not making really much of a difference in how we design ships?
So we do have, we have, in terms of, based on the recommendation, for example, that was done on ventilation systems and so forth, we did a very, in detail study with, a group of atmospheric chemistry MDs who came on board Oasis of the Seas and actually released billions of microspheres to simulate how SARS-CoV-2 would spread through a cruise ship. And it was a very, very comforting result once the results came back. So these studies should be shortly released. That was done by University of Nebraska Medical Center in the US. And lots of these, in terms of some filtration upgrades, certain space upgrades that was recommended based on that to further improve it. Even though it was comforting results, those are implemented both in new builds and existing ships. There's also elements in terms of space ratio, which we already have one of the highest, but in terms of the new builds, there is elements to sanitation protocols and things like this, which is being put forward. But I don't see any other than the upgrades we already are planning for existing ships. There is not a huge amount for existing, for new vessels coming out.
Thank you, Patrik. Well, I'm happy to say, because it's usually a good sign, that the hour's almost completely gotten away from us, and it feels like we could continue talking for hours, and hopefully our audience participants have found it interesting. But I'd like to, as we close, maybe go around and starting with you, Nick, and ask for a couple of comments about what you see for the future of the industry, what you see as far as, how you're going to come back. What's it going to look like? Are you optimistic? And what do you see in the way of emerging markets and things like that? If you could just offer your own thoughts along those lines to close, I'd appreciate it. And then Pete and Patrik, I'll call to you before we wrap.
Yes, I'm extremely optimistic. I'm optimistic because of, prior to going into this crisis, actually the only question we were all asking ourselves is, can we build the ships quick enough? The capacity was the challenge. It's a massive growth area. We know from our own retention levels, in terms of where we've had to move cruises this year, the latest is in the high 80% of people wanting to stay with us and book on a fresh cruise. So the loyalty and the support for this sector is a massive growth sector. So in my mind, I have no question whatsoever that when we're able to do so safely, when it's the right time, and when to some extent consumer behavior sort of embraces travel again, and it's not overly helpful, frankly, having government ministers at the moment saying that it's illegal to book holidays. I don't think probably the transport minister meant to say it in quite those terms, but once we've got to a place where actually all of us are behind travel restarting, then I think we're going to be in a very positive place. And just to sort of finish, just where Patrik sort of left off, really around, what about our ships? Are they pandemic are they pandemic proofed, if you like? And I think I would answer with a thundering great yes as well. We've got a very high space ratio. There are balconies with every cabin. We've got air conditioning that is focused on each cabin, and then separately on the corridors. We have dining service in all of our restaurants. We've had to retrofit sinks in some of the public places, and there are various other things that we're doing. But in terms of a controlled environment, because one might say pandemics are here to stay with us perhaps for a longer period than we might otherwise wish. Well, of course, that's perhaps a silly thing to say. None of us wish it at all. I think we are well equipped to deal with it.
Thank you, Nick. Pete, your final word?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that as an industry, we've been incredibly well self-regulated. If you look back to when this crisis hit us back in late March last year, all cruise lines took decisions before any government told us what we can and cannot do. We actually worked on it. We self-regulated. We realized that we had issues here and we need to resolve them. We all stopped our cruising programs in a manner which we could do at that time. And that's sort of an accolade to us as an industry to say, we recognize there's a problem here. We'll deal with that and put all the commercial concerns to one side and look only at the safety of our crew and passengers at that stage. And then going forward, I think as an industry, will it be even better at regulating and self-regulating? We work really well as an industry to make sure our safety and our welfare is at paramount. And if you look at cruising, it was growing locally from a UK perspective and for worldwide before we went into these challenges. And even with the news over the last 24 hours and comments made by various ministers over whether you should be buying holidays or not at this stage. Do you know what? I look back at the last week's bookings, people are still booking. That tells you all. And if I've cancelled a cruise for this year, they're going to book later in the year. They're already doing that, or they're booking for next year. So the loyalty and the love of cruise is there. And I think that love of cruise is spreading further in time. There's so many different diverse types of cruise you can go on. And you mentioned earlier, from with ships on with just 20 or 30 people on, right up to 6,000 people on. There's a cruise for everyone out there and every style of person, whether it's somebody who wants to lay about and in luxury or someone who wants to jump off and do lots of exploring, deep exploring from there. And I think as an industry, we've got something to offer many people in the UK and worldwide for there.
Yeah, I think if it had been a live session, there might have been a few questions for us to ask of the Secretary of State in light of those comments for a clarification. Patrik, last word from you.
I was just going to say, I echo what both Peter and Nick have said, and you, Bud, but it's just cruising provides such a unique vacation experience. And there is a reason why we all had such a huge growth building new ships, and we can't have enough spaces to fill up all. I mean, there's just such a big growth until COVID hit us, right? And I think it's quite clear, or at least I am very optimistic, that once COVID have subsided to some extent, and we have this controllable environment, we can provide these unique vacations experiences once more. And it doesn't matter if you are traveling with your family or just as a couple, the environment that we create on board a ship and the experience, whether it's dining, entertaining, and as I said, some ships with zip liner on them and aqua theaters and all sorts. I mean, there's such a broad range of experiences, and going to all these different destinations, both helping economically in those locations and everything that we do. I think it provides such a unique experience to everyone. So it can only continue to grow, and I'm certainly looking forward to the day when I can go back on the ships and sail again as well, and be on board the ships and spend more time. I had the experience of doing the Celebrity Edge across the Atlantic here before we had the shutdown, and it's incredible experience in the different places that we go. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Patrik. And just to wrap up, I think I'd like to use that opportunity to see a comment that came in late here. And, not only is it getting our operations back on the ground and getting our guests back, but also there are hundreds of thousands of seafarers employed in our sector that are waiting to come back to work and need us for their livelihoods. And we should feel that responsibility. And I would feel remiss if I didn't make a comment about seafarers worldwide. I think we all need to take a moment and think about how we need to be grateful for the incredible service that they have provided, the 1.4 million of them that are out there and keeping our economies functioning and keeping trade moving at a time of terrible distress for themselves and their families, and many of them having to overstay their contracts. I just was involved in resolving an extremely difficult situation in Asia with a cargo ship that we have, and it was heartbreaking to see what they were having to endure because a charterer had just no sympathy for these crew members, and I think we need to be grateful for them every single day and think about them. I do share the optimism of the panel for what it's worth about the return, and I will certainly express that back in plenary. I did also want to say I almost never get to do this anymore and moderate. When I was with Clea, I would do it more often than I could shake a stick at. With the three of you, it's just been a really interesting experience that I've enjoyed to help facilitate this conversation between you as the experts today. It's really been my pleasure to guide this discussion and help you get your points across. And I understand that at 3:40 or 3:45, the plenary will reconvene. So thank you again for your attention. I hope our audience has enjoyed the session as much as I think we all have as your panelists and moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.